If you have consultants coming in, for example, they may be able to give you advice and they can walk away after they give you that advice. As the CIO, you have to live with it. What can be improved? What are we doing that's repetitive? Or how could we improve the customer experience?
It's the fundamentals of entrepreneurship. Like, what is the problem you're here to solve, right?
We weren't able to take all of the incoming calls. Well, now you have to balance what's the customer experience with what you're measuring as ROI.
I'm Dr. Amy Athey. As a licensed psychologist and performance expert, working with elite athletes, C-suite executives, and high performers operating in some of the most demanding environments, I've seen what it truly takes to perform when it matters most. From supporting members of the Naval Special Warfare community to advising leaders in high-stakes, high-pressure situations, one truth remains consistent. The tools that drive performance are the same. You prepare in a way that allows you to show up ready when the moment arrives. Each week, I'll share practical tools and insights to help you strengthen how you think, lead, and perform. Welcome to Still Evolving.
Welcome back to Still Evolving. I'm Dr. Amy Athey, and before I bring our next guest in, I want to spend a few minutes on something I keep watching play out with executive teams across nearly every industry that I work with right now, because it has quietly become one of the most defining performance questions of this era. There is a sentence I've been hearing over and over in leadership conversations, which is some version of, we need AI, we cannot afford to fall behind on AI. The urgency in that sentence is real, and the pressure underneath it is real. But what I find missing from almost every version of that conversation is the harder question sitting just beneath the surface, which is, what is the actual return we are chasing here? And what is it going to cost us to get there? Not only financially, but the way in which our people work, the trust on our teams, and the kind of leaders that we are asking ourselves to become in the process. Most of the AI return on investment story right now is being told in the language of efficiency or quality control. Time saved, headcount avoided, processes accelerated. That framing is comfortable because it sounds clean and it does not openly threaten anyone in the room. The trouble is, when you build a business case for a transformation this significant on a story that polite, you end up sidestepping the conversations that actually determine whether the investment pays off. The leaders I see right now getting AI right are the ones willing to widen the lens, to look at the human cost alongside the financial picture, to ask honestly what they are asking their people to absorb, and to make decisions that account for both. The leaders I see getting it wrong are the ones treating it as a procurement decision when it is really an operating model decision wearing procurement disguise. This is where the readiness work that I do with executives keeps showing up. Showing up well in a moment like this is not about having more conviction or more certainty. It's about having the composure to stay in the harder question when the room is being pulled toward the simpler one, or clarity to see what the data is actually telling you and what it is not, and the courage to make a decision that serves the long arc of the business rather than the short arc of the news cycle. Those capacities are not built, and yet they are the difference between an executive who leads through transformation and one who simply funds one. The second element I'd like to touch on is what I've come to find the power in authentic advice. This isn't your colleague or that vendor or that consultant trying to upsell you an idea. This is really coming from a place of understanding your experience, caring enough to be curious about that, to learn more, so that in collaborative problem solving, we can deliver something that is most impactful and needed in the moment. I'm bringing both of these ideas together today because they are not actually separate. The AI conversation and the trust conversation with authenticity are running through the same leaders at the same time, under the same pressure, and the decisions executives are making right now about how much to invest, who to listen to, and how to lead their organization through these shifts are going to shape the next decade of how their businesses operate. That is precisely the territory I want today's guest to walk us through, because he has lived both sides of it. My guest today is Dan Ortman, and Dan has spent more than 25 years inside enterprise technology leadership, with more than 15 of those years focused on the Microsoft ecosystem specifically. In his current role, he is Global Director of the Microsoft Alliance at Kyndryl, where he leads commercial advisory strategy for complex multinational clients, working directly with CIOs and CFOs on how to align their Microsoft investments with financial governance, risk management, and the actual business outcomes they are trying to drive. Dan is also a recognized voice in the FinOps community, having served a 3-year term in the FinOps Foundation Government Board, and he's a FinOps certified professional who has helped build enterprise-scaled governance models that help cost transparency, accountability, and value realization across cloud and software portfolios. He is the creator of the FinOps in 5 Thought Leadership series, where he shares his perspective on Microsoft commercial governance and AI-era cloud economics for the leaders trying to make sense of all of it. What makes his perspective worth the audience time today is that he sat on both sides of the table. Dan is a former CIO with direct profit and loss accountability, which means he has carried the weight of these decisions himself. And he now brings that operator's experience into the advisory work that he does. He is known for taking conversations that usually live in the weeds of licensing and cloud optimization and elevating them into the kind of executive level strategic discussions they were always supposed to be. That combination, the operator who became the advisor, exactly what I wanted in the room for this conversation, because the questions we are about to work through are the ones that benefit enormously from someone who has lived inside both seats. Dan, welcome to Still Evolving.
Hi, Amy. Thanks. It's great to be here. It's really an honor. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. We wanted to kick around a topic which probably we can't get through like 10 minutes of conversation in our work lives or even personally without it coming up. These days we hear about, we need AI. You are leading in this space. I'm curious, what do you think that leaders and teams are actually missing in this conversation, especially when we're talking about making decisions with this technology and we're looking at the costs and then also the potential return?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really is everywhere. I mean, even at home, I have 4 kids and 2 in high school, 2 in college. Actually, 1 just graduated. But they're all talking about it, even at school. So it's in the workplace. It's decisions leaders are having to make. It's in the schools. It's really is everywhere. Almost to the point it's exhausting. But when we say we need AI, and a lot of leaders are saying we need AI without even really necessarily a plan or a strategy behind it. So my thinking on this is we need AI. It's missing the second half of the sentence. For what? What do we need AI for? And, that's the answer is different for everybody, but that's a question that you need to be able to answer. It's not, it's not improving the business. It's not going to be measurable ROI if you don't know what it's for. So, I think that's a key place to start is, what is the business outcome that we're trying to achieve? As a leader, what are you trying to accomplish, or what gaps do you see that perhaps AI could benefit or help accelerate or a better customer experience? So, I think just adding for what to the end of that sentence is a really good place to start.
Well, certainly you hone in on the target, right? Like it's the fundamentals of entrepreneurship. Like what is the problem you're here to solve, right? Like whatever product or service you're developing or whatever technology you're using to augment that product and service. Ideally, there's a pain being solved with that addition. Right now, though, a lot of times when we talk about AI, ROI, and teams, and I think also why it it really infiltrates like the human element is it's being pitched as time savings or efficiency, right? Some people, depending on your team, maybe looking at quality control. I think of accounting, for example. But when we think about time savings and efficiency, I see in the conversations I'm having with leaders and teams, almost kind of like a reverb back, because it almost sounds once again like do more with less. And so now we're going to give you this tech tool that enables you to do more. And in some ways, there's a camp that says, well, that feels safer because it doesn't threaten your job, right? Like we're just going to give you this tool to help you be more efficient, to do more. But I'm curious for you and your experience when you're working with teams looking to adopt AI, agentic AI, or other tools to augment the business and service, what you're seeing from the human element in terms of the perceived cost of that adoption.
Yeah, I've seen both ends of the spectrum where there's been real success in doing that, and also where there's been, in my opinion, real failure. Just as an example, my HVAC company, I had an issue with the AC not that long ago, and called up, and I thought it was somebody that I was talking to, but it actually turned out it was AI, and I was kind of repeating what my challenge was, and it kept, it couldn't understand what I was saying. And so the experience ended up being that I hung up and then called back later. Then I was able to get a live agent. And I told them about that experience, and they're like, yeah, we're having some real troubles with it. And in my mind, I think a little bit differently since this is what I do for a living. And I was like, this is a really good example of where just AI for the sake of AI could be bad. But then I realized they said they were doing it because they were missing calls. So their ROI would be, we're missing less calls. And so we don't lose business because we weren't able to take all of the incoming calls. Well, now you have to balance what's the customer experience with what you're measuring as ROI. And I know that's a very small business challenge, but I think it's a good example of where if it's not a successful implementation, if you're just sort of piloting it and it's not sort of been worked all the way through, you can have challenges versus when you really leverage a full AI framework where you've built in the governance, you have change management, and people understand how it's going to impact them. They've got training, so they know how to use the tools that are being given to them. All of those things that go along with, and the security, by the way, too. I mean, that's one of the craziest things with AI. There could be so much data loss and other security issues with AI because you're just putting, information into these prompts that's going into the LLMs, and without the right governance and settings, that could be training the model on things that it shouldn't be. So the successful implementations are where that framework is put in place. And that's really important, I think, as leaders to have that framework and move away from just, hey, we're just doing AI. We're going to do this pilot. Everybody has to try this. Everyone should be using Copilot. We're going to track if you use it or not. And, if you don't, you're going to get a slap on the wrist. I've seen a lot of that. So you've got to have that framework so that people feel supported and they feel safe and they know how it's going to help them and not just AI for the sake of AI.
When I played, this may sound tangential at first, but I promise I'm going somewhere with it in response. I played, basketball was my sport that I played in high school, college, and my high school basketball coach left a significant impression in many ways for me as a leader and certainly in all aspects of my life. She used to always remind us, I think it came from John Wooden as well, be quick, but don't hurry. And there is a sense of urgency, certainly in private industry where there is such a thing of being first to the market. There is such a thing of the strength in being able to innovate and stay cutting edge and deliver continued value for your clients. And there's significant risk, as you're just describing, with the hurry. And the framework, I really appreciate, kind of like whenever I'm going on a road trip this weekend, like there's a bit of a plan, right? Like there's not just, maybe when I was 20 in college for spring break, we're just going to go to Florida. Not a lot of plan, right? Like that, certainly did I make it to Florida then? I did. Could I have had a more fulfilling experience, perhaps with less risk, with a little bit of planning and it before, considering all that could have been there for opportunity and hazards along the way. Yeah. So that having that plan and that implementation model is so key. I'm curious, with the sense of urgency that many leaders are experiencing with considering how we can update, refine, revolutionize our business models. Where do you see kind of the breakdown in the plan happening? Is it around the change management? Is it considering the security? Or do you really see evidence of where perhaps less well thought out plans are kind of breaking at many different ways? Yeah,
I think especially for senior leaders, you're right. There is this sense of, we have to hurry, if we're going to be competitive in our market, whatever the industry is, we have to hurry. We have to be first to market, or we certainly can't be last. So I think the challenge there is translating that hurry, and we need to use AI to practical use cases, practical business cases. So I think the important thing there is working with the people that are at the ground level. So what is we talked about the business challenges earlier. So once you know what those are, working with those people to really understand how, what can be improved. What are we doing that's repetitive, or how could we improve the customer experience? And then you develop that plan and that strategy and use a framework to execute it. So I think, that translation, to me, that seems to be the gap, that lack of the framework, that lack of translation. And, I think once that's in place, you can hurry, this can be put in place fairly quickly. But you've got to have that framework. That's what's super important. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of cases. I see. You also talked about in the implementation, having the training, having the touch points with your people so that they can understand what we are solving for, how we're going about doing that, how we're going to mitigate the risks involved, and also how we're going to collect the feedback so that we can continue to evolve. I had a conversation I think it was yesterday, with a leader looking at what do we want to measure? And how do we want to get feedback around this? And I understand with the use case, that could look very different. But in professional services, sometimes that's just utilization, like you joked about, how many times you're logging on or how many tokens are you using. Certainly that's one data point. I don't know how rich or telling that's going to be for continued refinement, just because somebody's clicking. And they could be asking, give me some update my dinner menu planning for the week, or provide a grocery list, right? So when you talk about the feedback, either from the people or the use of the technology itself, where do you find the greatest value kind of in collecting the information to inform leaders on what's next? How do we continue to evolve this? Yeah, I think here's maybe a good place also to highlight that, there's definitely different types of AI. And I know that could mean so many different things. There's different LLMs and that sort of thing. But I think there's really also two different sort of use cases. One is the end user use cases that a lot of us are familiar with. So Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude, excuse me. So you have, these end user scenarios where, any of us can just start doing prompts and we're using AI and we're creating stuff and we're faster than we used to be, when maybe we're saving time. But then there's also more of the operational side. So our developers now they're developing code faster. Sometimes arguably not as good. They don't have that programming experience. And now that, we're building this code, or AI's building code, rather to solve for a business challenge. So in some cases we're solving operational challenges or improving operational process, that doesn't really have anything to do with the end user, but it's solving a business challenge. So as a leader, again, especially senior leaders in larger organizations, knowing what you're solving for and how you're able to measure the ROI of those different scenarios is super important. Because, like you said, from an end user, if you're just measuring if they're using it or not, that's a very poor indicator of whether that big investment you're making in some of these technologies is worth it or not. Even if you're saving time, if the end user comes back and says, oh my gosh, I'm saving, 10 hours a week, then as a leader, the question might be, okay, now what happens in those 10 hours, so is there measurable value from that? So if it's, now there's more time to focus on our customers, or now there's more, the quality of what I'm presenting is better. Our services are better, or, whatever the industry is, if it's having a positive impact on the business, that's a different story than just, are we using it or not?
Absolutely. It reminds me, I appreciate hearing your guidance, really, because I want to highlight your journey has been both internal, serving as that CIO, the executive who's working with the team, putting perhaps this framework, asking those questions of how we're measuring and what basically how that best informs our next steps, but also now in more of the consultancy leadership role. I'm curious, perhaps if you can expand a bit on what you've seen with professional services or the consultancy, and how you have best helped those leaders develop those frameworks, or perhaps utilize effective measurement and evolve the adoption for either one of those use cases, right? Depending on the business. And basically, how has your internal leadership experience really informed what has now been optimized in the consultancy leadership role?
Yeah. So as a CIO, the weight of these decisions hits way different than the weight as a consultant. As a consultant, the pressure is, you're being brought in as the subject matter expert. You've got to deliver. You've got to know the answers. You've got to, you've got to really be able to deliver, and it has to be extremely high quality. As the CIO, the weight is totally different, because the decisions that are made, if you have consultants coming in, for example, they may be able to give you advice and they can walk away after they give you that advice. As the CIO, you have to live with it. So if there's outages, your door is the one being knocked on. If there's, a large cost for implementing whatever that is, you have to be able to defend that cost, and it'll impact your budget. And, if there's security risks, that lands with you. So the weight of every decision is just so different. And when you've lived that, not that great consultants that haven't, sort of lived that internal IT life can't be great consultants. Just for me in my own journey, I think that empathy for what takes place after I make a recommendation I think it just hits me a little bit different than perhaps other consultants. And so I think I really lean into that and just know that I can't just come in with an agenda where I'm trying to position something, I'm trying to sell a service or a product. It has to be how is that going to impact them and their role? What do they have to do after I walk out of the door? What do they have to be able to defend? And it really has to solve a business challenge, or it has to help them achieve an outcome that they're trying to achieve. And, I always say one of the things that would drive me absolutely bananas would be, people that would come in and just ask me what keeps me up at night. Like I hated that question as a CIO because I know what they're doing. It's just they're waiting for me to tell them what my problem is instead of asking me about my business and what I have going on and learning about me. They're asking just for me to tell them what the problem is, and then they'll have an answer for that problem that they can sell me. Yeah. So, I try to avoid any questions like that, and I try to genuinely learn. What are they trying to achieve as a business? What are their goals as a business, and how can I help them get there?
It sounds to me like that true connection, right? Like where you're really trying to understand one's experience if you are partnering with them. If you're.
Ooh. Hey, hang on a second. Sorry. Hey, I don't know how that answered, but I'm doing a webinar right now. I got to go on Do Not Disturb.
We'll wrap up in a minute.
Answered.
Are you good? We can wrap it up.
No, I just went on Do Not Disturb.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
Awesome.
That was just it was a coworker.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
I'll have to cut that out.
our production is first class, so I'm sure they'll be able to just splice it out. I guess I was coming back to like, it sounds like the true connection, right? Like when you're really looking to best understand someone else's experience that you're partnering with, right? Rather than just one angle of it. That's really more about you and your own agenda than really what they have on their plate and they're looking to solve for. The last question I have with regards to that, given your experience, both as the internal leader and now in the consultancy space, knowing those pressures and now serving in a role to help support those leaders and organizations having to perform under that pressure, what have you observed that's really differentiated those leaders who have dealt with that pressure and still performed optimally? And perhaps also the flip side of what have you seen in leaders that maybe misstepped in managing that pressure and showing up in those moments that matter?
Yeah, I think, it's easy to lean towards like, what's the most sophisticated answer or solution? And I think those leaders that are able to get to that clarity rather than it just being complicated or sophisticated, but really have that clarity. I think that tends to be where you see a lot of success. I think it kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier with that plan and that framework. And, it doesn't have to be the most complicated answer. Just it has to be clear, clear direction. And I know we didn't talk a lot about change management, but that's another one that's, I hold near and dear to me just because, I've seen the difference where you really have implemented change management. You really think about people and change is hard. So when anybody goes through any sort of change, whether it's in personal or professional, and look how fast we're going through change all the time now, especially with the conversation we're having here. So those leaders that bring that clarity and change management and that direction to people, just drives so much more success, just from what I've seen in my experience.
Absolutely. I work with leaders and teams and how they can become moment ready. And the 4 C's that we use for that are composure, clarity, connection to people and purpose, and then also to be able to take that courageous action. And the tool that we commonly leverage for clarity is asking the question of what's important now. I really appreciate your point that it doesn't always have to have this grand, sophisticated framework or plan. It can be, what is that simple action that needs to be taken? Less is more, if you will. And that clarity is so powerful, and being able to show up, to be able to execute in those moments that matter. Dan, I really appreciate this conversation. Certainly, I have many more questions, so hopefully we can continue at another time. But in wrapping up today, I wanted to kind of turn back to you to share, what is that immediate and actionable strategy? Because we've talked a lot about perhaps the current condition, right? Like the evolution of agentic AI or the use of AI in order to optimize a number of different aspects of business, and certainly the leadership considerations that go with that. But this is a grind. Like, you're a seasoned executive. You've kind of been around many evolutions, and certainly in the tech space, agentic AI is not necessarily new. It is to maybe us laymen, but what has helped you sustain at such a high level over the many iterations, if you will, in your career? And perhaps there's that immediate and actionable takeaway that we could all consider for our own lives.
Yeah, I think directly to this conversation, I think getting out of the pilot. Everybody's doing a pilot. Everybody's experimenting. And I think just moving forward, get that plan, get that clarity, and move forward. For me, on a more personal level, with my career, I think it's the continuous learning and not being afraid to, jump into something that you don't know the answer to. That was something that, as I shifted from a CIO to a consultant, it was hard to learn to say, I don't know, because you want to have the answer always. But you don't always have the answer. So being able to say, I don't know, and then how do I learn that, and how do I get better? So I think I think being able to say I don't know and taking that next step is huge. That would, I think, be a big takeaway, not even just for leaders, but for everybody. Absolutely.
Stay humble. Absolutely. Yes. Dan, thank you so much for your time and your sharing on Still Evolving. Grateful to have you.
Thank you so much.